is the session immediately before lunch. It's what you always used to say about media presentations and pitches. It's the session immediately before lunch. This is now, we're going to enter a discussion about measurement and accountability. I suppose absolutely the bedrock of everything that we do is measurement. We measure audiences, we measure the effect of whatever it is we're doing on consumers, we measure the results of whatever it is that we do on the businesses that we work for. And if the basic measurement is faulty, well, we have a problem. This is really the kind of foundation of everything at the end of the day. This is the basics, the basis. If you like, this is the bricks on which the building from which the building is built. If the bricks are well made and they're well constructed, then the building will not fall down. The building will survive and everything will work very nicely. But how do you know how well the bricks have been constructed? How do you know how robust the bricks are? How well made they are? Are they made of the best possible materials? And how do you know if they're not subject to some sort of rigorous validation of the way in which bricks are made? And it's exactly the same with measurement. So I'm going to introduce you now to Denise Turner, who's Research Director at the IPA. And Denise, in turn, will introduce her team. I'll put the chart up first. Denise.
Thank you so much. And actually, Brian has stolen some of my thunder for my introduction, but that's fine. But everybody seems to be obsessed with measurement these days. And actually, as somebody who's worked in measurement for 30 plus years, makes my heart sing, actually. But I think Houston, we have a problem, or actually we have several problems. And Brian alluded to this. What are we measuring? Are we measuring exposure to advertising? Are we measuring how people feel about ads? Are we are we measuring outcomes? And I said in a recent podcast I did for the Media Leader that outcomes are sexy, but inputs are super important. So we need to really work out what is going on and what do we mean by all of those definitions of measurement? It's an amorphous mass, and actually we need to be really clear about what we're measuring and why. So last year we did a play when we did Advertising Who Cares. We're not doing a play. Luca is quite delighted we're not doing a play. But actually it's really important that we understand all of the inputs and the outcomes. So actually, to make lives harder for ourselves, we divided our work stream into 3. I'm not quite sure why, but anyway. But it's really interesting, the discussions we've been having this morning, that measurement seems to be, the fundamental bedrock of what we need to do. If you can't work out what's happening and why, then you might as well shut up shop and go home, is my perspective. So we've got 3 short presentations. Short, she says. So we're looking at audience measurement inputs, and that's going to be the lovely John Waite from Havas. And then we've got ad effect measurement from Fiona Blades from Mesh and Anthony Jones from ThinkBox. And then modelling and analytics from Billy Ryan from the 7 Stars. So I'm well aware that measurement is not a linear process, that it doesn't just go from you do something and then something happens. It's a loop rather than necessarily a linear process. But the one thing I would say is that our overall theme is humanity. Remembering that we market to people, not devices. And, in an age of algorithms, of devices, etc., we need to remember that it's actually you and me that pay money to buy a product. And that's what's really important. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to John to start off with. Thank you, John.
Does this work? Yeah, hi. Good morning. Yeah, so as Denise said, I think one of the things we've got a bit of a problem with is we forget who we're advertising to. So much time is spent analysing numbers in spreadsheets or cost efficiencies or, as my friend would say, shitty little digital metrics that mean absolutely nothing about what's working for advertisers. one of the biggest things we miss day in, day out is that we're advertising to human beings. It was wonderful to walk in this morning and see that huge billboard outside, high attention media, as I walked into the room. But so much of what we do doesn't think about the human experience. And there's a cautionary tale from 3 brands, and if you work at these brands, I'm not sorry because I'm putting you up here as a bad example, but also a very good example of what not to do. And if you can tell me what these 3 guys have in common, it's that they got it horribly wrong for a huge number of years. So Procter & Gamble was investing over 200 million in digital media. They pulled that digital media spend and saw absolutely no impact on the bottom line for their business. 200 million of digital ad spend that they pulled and saw absolutely no effect from. Uber, another great one, was spending in some large digital platforms, I think $190 million to try and drive app downloads. That's what they wanted, app downloads. Again, they were brave enough to pull all that spend. Someone went, something's not sitting right here. Are we really driving app downloads, or are they just telling us that's what's happening? No impact on app downloads when they pulled $190 million worth of ad spend in those platforms. And the same with Chase. So Chase went through a process of taking their 400,000 websites they were advertising across down to just 5,000. That's an almost 99% reduction, and saw no change. Right, okay, brilliant. So there's so much stuff there that just isn't working. It's hugely, hugely wasteful. And it's so important to go back to the points that have been talked about earlier. If you think about, I've got loads to say on principal traded media. I wish I could have come and sat with you there to talk about. But it's a reality that there's a lot of advertisers that are prioritising outcomes over human effectiveness and impact. And if you just looked at outcomes and you look at a spreadsheet where it's telling you all this spend is driving a low CPA to app conversions through terrible attribution models or worse, you're going to keep spending on it. So those brands were incredibly brave to change the way that they did things, pull that money and have a look at things a bit differently, because the huge missing middle is about human exposure and experience. No single ad can ever be effective. I can't believe I'm saying this if people don't see it. But so many ads are basically like this, right? It's like serving all your out of home under the sea. Viewability metrics would tell you that was viewable, right? Something on a spreadsheet would say that was effective. There's a low cost per fish, maybe, I don't know. But impressions don't equal impact. They never have done. The currencies that we trade on are purely about the delivery of media to a device or an environment. They're not about human impact. And I used to be been doing this for 18 years. I used to be a telly buyer for a long, long time. And ultimately, you know, it's always been about OTS, opportunity to see. You're never guaranteed. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? That's been the reality of buying media. But there are better ways to do things, because not all reach is equal. I do a lot of work with Lumen. I talk very vocally about attention metrics, for example. They're not the be-all and end-all, but it's super important. So if you think about that kind of cost-value equation of media, so where brands are thinking, I need to buy more media on a cheap CPM, I need to drive down the unit cost of media the whole time, I couldn't tell you one single brand or one single auditor who is yet incorporating this kind of analysis into their cost of media evaluation. This is looking at the human experience of different media channels. So this is Lumen data, and they look at the total number of seconds of visual attention that different media channels get per 1,000 impressions. And to this, you can apply a cost per 1,000 seconds of attention. If you were looking at this chart in terms of CPM, you'd see our TV is pretty high, cinema is pretty high. Good, they should be, because they're driving huge amounts of huge volumes of attention. Whereas, you know, ads on Facebook, let's say Instagram, it's okay, it's fine, but it works in a very, very different way, and we need to understand how that kind of exposure is working differently to long, high attention quality formats. And it matters. So someone mentioned, I think it was someone from Sky, the Profitability 2.0 study earlier. Great piece of work by Group A in Game Theory. I don't work for them, but it was still really good. And I nick it all the time, so that's great. But Lumen did a follow-up piece to understand if the profitability study looked at the long and short-term profitability of different media channels. I think they analysed £2 billion worth of media investment in the UK. Lumen did a follow-up with Ubiquity to say, how does that correlate to the attention that's paid to those channels? And Karen Stacey will be very happy to see cinema sitting right at the top there. But the channels, unsurprisingly, that people are more attentive to, that they have a better experience in, that the media is of a better quality, not only are better at driving attention, but they're better at driving profitability for brands. So better media, better experiences, more profitable. The trouble is, you can't very easily show this on a spreadsheet all the time. It's a long-term effect, and that's where the big problem comes in. I wrote a piece on LinkedIn called "Have We Forgotten How Advertising Works?" that I published a few months ago. And I really think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how advertising really works against humans. You know, Ehrenberg said advertising is a weak force, but a long one. It is a weak force. The very notion that you can serve someone any kind of ad and they'll immediately go and buy a product. Has anyone ever done that? Fucking nonsense, isn't it? But that's how so much of like performance marketing mindset would lead you down that road of thinking, and that's pervasive amongst people in agencies, among brands, among marketeers. We have to reset and think: how does advertising really work against human beings? Les Burnett, I think he's in the room somewhere. The work they do with the long and short of it builds the same thing. Ads build memory and emotion over time. The idea that we can drive an app download from one impression on a digital platform is just nonsense, and I don't know why we keep doing it, right? So at Havas, we have a global measurement framework that tries to incorporate all of these different elements of measurement, right? So first and foremost is attentive. Are we delivering attentive media to the right audiences, and how are we measuring that? So we're using JICs, we're using impression reports, we're using best-in-class gold standard panels like Barb, but augmenting them with additional data. So to understand the attentiveness, the cost of that attention, and ultimately, did this ad, or was the likelihood that this ad reached a human being, not a bot, not a fish, not any of that stuff, in the right environment? It's the first part. And this is the thing, you can't do any of these things in isolation. You cannot do the next bit if you've not done the first bit. So much of outcomes-based advertising jumps straight to the click, the conversion, the web visit, whatever it might be, without ever understanding if someone actually saw that ad. So many attribution models will attribute success to ads that have never been seen by a person. It's really bad. So you have to do that to do the next bit. The next piece is understanding the impact it has on people. So brand lift studies, message association, purchase intent, understanding if someone did see this, did it do anything in both the short and the longer term? And the last piece, and probably the most important, is incrementality. That's where all of those brands in the first slide that I showed get it completely wrong. There's lots of stuff with advertising that would have happened anyway. And my biggest issue is lots of performance marketing, they're really good at understanding people's behaviors when they're about to convert or buy or do something. That's what these algorithms are great at, understanding when people are about to do something and then pepper them with ads wherever you go. And then we cause the sale. That is at the heart of lots of what performance marketing is, whether that's retargeting, prospecting, that is what you do. You can't just do that piece. You can't do that one piece on its own. It misses the incrementality point. I know I'm a massive fan of attention, I wang on about it loads, but attention isn't a silver bullet, right? So Byron Sharp was relatively critical about it. It doesn't, of course, guarantee effectiveness. That's not how advertising works. It has to be to the right person with a great creative message. Are they in market? Are they out of market? Just picking ad environments that are more likely to be seen is not enough. But it goes further in terms of our understanding of how audiences are engaging with ads than anything we have right now. I think it needs to be much more widespread. I mean, I've been talking about this subject for maybe 5 years, and I'm disappointed that I'm not being asked by more clients to incorporate this into their cost effectiveness analysis, to their audits, for example. We had a conversation with a brand the other day that said, yes, but if we do this, how does it affect our media efficiency costs, our CPMs? It's completely the wrong question. They're probably going to go up because you're buying better media, but that's the juxtaposition we have. But it's good to see the likes of the ARF, the IAB, the ANAs, for example, validating attention standards and thinking more about how does audience measurement actually measure people and not devices. And also, we've worked a bit with Ubiquity, who I know are kind of looking into this subject, and we have seen a bit of movement in terms of them, in terms of those early charts, trying to think about the quality cost of media, not just the overall CPM. There's my face. I'm wearing exactly the same top. That's an error, wasn't it? Yeah, I didn't take this selfie on the way. So yeah, I do work for one of the big six, and it's an obvious question: is what are we doing about it? Because I think you can say you can stand there and talk about this, but are you actually changing the way you do things? Yes, we are. One of the things I would say in credit of the large agency networks is we do stuff. We invest, we build. We've had a global partnership with Lumen for the last 4 to 5 years, and we build these data sets into our tools to better advise clients. Now, whether those clients want that advice, appreciate that advice, whether our people use it, very different conversation. But the availability is there, right? So we have tools that allow you to analyze reach alongside attention, because in this world of abundant impressions, impacts, everything else, not all reach is equal. And you can see every one of those blue dots is a media plan, a different allocation of budget across channels. There's 100 different ways to achieve 90% reach of your target audience, but you could have no attention or you could have loads of attention, right, in the extreme. And it shows you the variations of plans that you can get through that. And the second thing is then analyzing digital placements and formats to understand what's driving actual visual attention, human attention. Are the ads in the right environment? Are they big enough? Are they surrounded by loads of clutter? All that analysis happens within one of our tools, the MMP planner. I think we've got about 200,000 global domains in there at this point in time. So, I mean, that's really kind of the crux of where I want to go, is that human beings are the connective tissue to everything. Nothing happens. No campaign can be effective without people seeing it. If I told my grandma that, she'd think you were nuts. Like, well, of course, it's so obvious, but we forget it every single day. So that's kind of me, but thank you.
I think that, it feels like a really obvious thing, but it's really fundamental that you need people to do stuff. The other thing I would just call out is that, knowing the data of how many people see, hear, or come across an ad. So Simon Redican, I think, is in the audience somewhere, and he's been doing a sterling job on relaunching MediaMind and testing people's ability to remember data. And actually, if you know that, that's really important, because it's not like one person sees something or one person hears something, it's knowing all of the data around that. So thank you, John. That was absolutely brilliant. I love humans as the connective tissue. That's going to be my new favourite phrase. And now I'm going to introduce Fiona Blades and Anthony Jones to take us through the second part of the work stream.
Thank you very much indeed, Denise and John, and welcome everyone to the very messy but beautiful world of measuring advertising effectiveness. Well, this was the brief that we were given at the start. We needed to build a set of resources about ad measurement and some best practices. But like a typical group of Advertising Who Cares work stream, we challenged the brief. So we were thinking there are some bigger questions that we need to answer here. Are we too big company focused? Do we have a good enough understanding of the around 70% of UK ad spend, which is outside of the media professional advice? And I think that came up this morning as well. And then again, we've got a whole load of received wisdom. And how valid is that? So there seemed to be a lot of received wisdom in today's world, and these were some of the things that our group was feeling about that. So first of all, that there's too much data and there's not enough time. Would that be true? That marketers only care about vanity metrics? Well, let's find out. And perhaps they're focusing too much on a single measure, or measuring what's really easy and not what's actually right. And is the measurement focus too short term? We've just heard a little bit about that earlier today as well. And of course, we've just heard from Jenny about the lack of transparency. And I think, is there an issue with measurement in terms of transparency? And are we doing too much of marking our own homework? So the question was, well, what do marketers think? Because this might be what, all of us pontificating thought in our group, but what do marketers really think that is going on? Do they think there's an issue? we needed to talk to some. So this is how we structured what we were doing. We thought there would be 3 different segments that we should actually consider. The first was bigger businesses. And we spoke to 8 CMOs from companies like Coca-Cola, from Boots, from Saga Cruises, and some others. And some of these are written up as blogs in a CMO superhero series, if anybody's interested. But we really wanted to find out what are the challenges that these marketers, who are all leaders in their field, were experiencing. The second thing was, let's have a look at SMEs. And I think most of us were fairly ignorant about what was happening with SMEs. So we started with desk research to identify what the current state of play is. And then we did some interviews with 5 SMEs. And then the third area was around the media agencies. And were the media agencies structured to deliver the type of measurement that the larger and the SME organizations actually need? So let's start with the bigger advertising situation and the creme de la creme of those 8 CMOs that we interviewed. Well, the first thing that really struck us was that there is a new role now for CMOs. So they always used to be the campaign heroes. They would be coming up and working with the agencies to come up with a big idea that might last for years and years. But that has all changed. Now it's an always-on world. Now they're looking at sponsorship. They're looking at retail media. They're looking at influencers. There are email campaigns and CRM. It is much more complex. And they need to be experienced orchestrators. So they are the ones that are having to orchestrate all these different things. But they're doing so in a world where maybe the measurement isn't adding up. So do we need to be providing them with a much better always-on score to help them know when to bring the different instruments in, when to push back, and how to make some beautiful harmonies? So these were some of the bigger company challenges that we identified. Even some of the larger companies needed to have an established baseline for consistent measurement. And that's particularly if you've got new different areas that you're investing in and you need some measurement. Yes, there is too much data and there is not enough actionable insights. So it did feel as though you'd got loads of instruments out there, but actually they were just making a cacophony of noise. You weren't really able to pull out what you needed from that. And this would also lead to conflicting metrics within organizations. And of course, that means you can't take decisions. So it's really important to be aligned, and I think that's come up earlier today. We do need to prove the long-term brand impact, and that is a real challenge for marketers, as well as obviously the short-term performance. And then something else that came up, the real need for entrepreneurial speed, but you've got to balance that with rigor. So you're making compromises sometimes in that. And then with the new world and the new areas to invest in, the measurement for innovative and experience-based marketing might really be lacking for you. There was something about quality, which I think is good, as well as quantity. So it's not just the quantity metrics, and I think that goes back to things like attention. But perhaps more than anything, there was this sense of not being able to look at the total picture. There is a real need for multi-channel attribution. And what we've got at the moment is data fragmentation. And I particularly like this quote: "We struggle with multi-channel attribution, trying to work out what really drives what." And I think I have a fragmented data landscape where you've got data trapped into different systems, whether that's Google or Meta or a variety of different sources. That was the big thing that was coming up. So what are the implications then for the CMOs, and where can Advertising Who Cares help? So obviously, there's building baselines that can systematically enable you to look year on year and learn and optimize in terms of your activity. I thought this was interesting, that we need to be able to embrace good enough measurement for the right concepts. And I think sometimes we get rushed off into measuring the wrong, easy things, but maybe we should actually just accept it's hard to measure, but let's look at the right concepts from the start. Creating organizational alignment. If you haven't got that, and you need to have that on key metrics and definitions, then you're going to have people working in different ways. So you need to bring everybody together behind those metrics so that everyone can see where their piece fits into the puzzle. And you do need, in a very financially, quarterly driven world, you need to have short-term performance. But you also need long-term brand health. And I think that marketers are realizing that it's not an either or, that actually you can build brands in retail, like in a high-end bar, you might build a high alcoholic beverage brand. And equally, you could see a TV ad or a cinema ad, and you might think, do you know, I could really do with getting a soft drink and go and buy that. So it was the fact that many of our activations do both. And focusing on the connecting measurement to business outcomes rather than just getting lost in the vanity metrics. So keeping things simple. But this has come up right at the beginning, and it's coming up again. Investing in a unified measurement framework that can handle this multi-channel attribution. What we need to be doing is we need to be creating this score. We need to be allowing all those instruments to see how to play and enabling our conductor to provide some beautiful music for us. So at this point, I am going to be handing over to Anthony, who's going to be talking through what we found with the SMEs.
Thank you, Fiona. As a group, one of the first questions we felt we needed to ask ourselves is, how much do we really know about the figures differ, but about 99% of the advertisers that exist in the world? And the answer was, well, we probably didn't know enough about the SMEs. Now, as luck would have it, when you bung a bunch of researchers in a room, someone sticks their hands up and says, I'm quite good at desk research. He's here today, laddie. Thank you very much. We tasked him with going out and finding out what exists out there in the world without the use of AI to help you to try and understand how SMEs go about their advertising processes and their evaluation. And the answer was, there's not much information out there. Enough to create a 2-page document with lots of sources and references that we can make available to anybody. But trying to take a presentation out of there's not much to talk about it, there were a few things that we could ultimately identify from the desk research. The vast majority, so about 2/3 of advertisers, currently exist without any resemblance of a marketing plan. They just get stuff done without necessarily worrying about the long and medium-term impacts of that. As a result of it, half of them don't even have any defined KPIs. Now, this is a very different situation from most of the bigger brands that Fiona was just talking about. And part of the reason life is made complicated is they very limited, dedicated analytical resource. And it seems to be that if the owner doesn't do it, nobody's going to do it. And what they definitely do lean on is these vanity metrics that have been referenced a few times: reach, impressions, engagements, and the kind of platform dashboards that they know they can access without too much difficulty. In fact, kind of ease of use of identifying the impact of their advertising overruled anything resembling technical rigor. A few facts and figures that may or may not be true is better than nothing, was the view. And there is definitely some evidence out there that there is support provided to these people by industry bodies, but usage of it seems very limited. So that was our view. We thought, well, we need to dig a bit deeper than that. So we ran a series of qual groups. So thank you again, members of the group who helped out on here, We only managed to complete 5 in the time available, but I think those of you who've done research before will understand that once you've done 5 or 6, most of the key themes will have come out. And what we identified amongst the SMEs is 2 areas. Measuring success. They find it really, really difficult to link spend, their advertising spend, to anything resembling an ROI in sales revenue. They know they spend money, they know they get sales, but they're never quite sure how the two are related. As a result, they definitely do focus on the short term, sales now, today, rather than looking at the longer term aspect of it. And they know that there are tools out there that they could use, but they find them really rather complicated, and they're obviously fragmented, and they're a bit scary, and they haven't really got time to think about it. And that comes back to the SMEs. If we want to help the SMEs understand and improve where they're spending their advertising dollar, we have to completely understand that apart from the very small number of SMEs that are very successful, most are really struggling, and they've got significant resource constraints. They've limited time to set up, monitor, analyze, evaluate campaigns. They know doing tests and controls and tests and experiments are a thing they should do because they've read about it. They haven't really got time or the resource or the capabilities to do that. They lack anything resembling professional staff to help them. And as a result, they have to rely on external agencies and help. And that seems to just drive further reduced visibility and control. They outsource it, but don't really understand what they've got or why they've got it. So where can the industry help these guys? Well, there's definitely a latent need, a demand for tools and training to help connect them, understand how to connect measurement with the return on investment. We need to provide to them clear and accessible guidance on how a measurement works and the kind of key measures that might be then worth looking at. Peer learning is important, and this kept coming up time and time again. We need case studies. We need case studies. They want to see other people who've done it and understand how it can apply for their business. And we need to identify affordable and easy-to-use measurement tools that they can use. So that's the second of the 3 legs that we looked at, the SMEs. What's going on in the media agency world? We spoke to a number of media agencies. We had a good amount of media agency representation within the group. And I think it's really important to say, given that most of these people in this room might well have worked in a media agency back in the day, the world, it turns out, is very, very different nowadays. In the old days, there was a research director who was the font of all knowledge, knew everything, the person that you could turn to for anything with regarding advertising, investment, measurement, etc., etc. That does not exist nowadays within media agencies. There is massive amounts of silos, and each silo focuses on specific areas relevant to their needs. Strategy and planning look at brand metrics, performance look at web traffic, content look at engagement or views. Insight, they are there, but they tend to look at the GICs, not unsurprising, but their role tends to be on more generic stuff, more bespoke research, probably research they're trying to sell to make a margin, and then social. And what's very clear within media agencies, compared to a few years ago, that there is a distinct lack of understanding of the whole picture, enormous depth of understanding of specific areas, but a limited understanding of the whole picture. So, looking at the 3 areas that we've conducted research in and worked across, what do we think we found that we need to take as a group, discuss and apply? Well, let's come back to the received wisdom that Fiona talked about earlier. So, have we found there is too much data and people don't have enough time? Yep. People are drowning, data overload. Do marketers care only about vanity metrics? No, they don't. And they certainly don't when they understand whether the difference between vanity metrics and things that really deliver to the business exists. So that's a kind of urban myth that we probably need to burst. Do people focus too much on single measures? No, they don't. Good news. Are they measuring what's easy, not what's right? Yeah. There is evidence to support that maybe more needs to be done to understand which are the really key metrics to measure. Is the measurement focus too short term? Well, there is definitely some evidence to support this, and that's definitely the case in SMEs. Is there enough transparency in measurement in terms of understanding actually what's happening, rather than the kind of lack of incrementality work. And yeah, for SMEs, they don't really have much understanding of what's going on in terms of measurement or their campaigns. And finally, are people relying too much on their own homework or information that given to them by the media owners? I invested your money and this is what we delivered for you. Trust me, it's true because I told you so. Yeah, potentially there is definitely some of that going on. So finally, some thoughts from the ad evaluation group. We need to think about embracing the whole. There's too much silos, too much fragmentation going on. We need to find ways that we can link the various points together. For the SMEs, there's definitely a knowledge maturity gap likely to grow. Those who are not doing anything at the moment and don't understand it will be stuck there doing nothing unless there's an intervention. Those who are looking at evaluation will continue. We need to, there are existing insights, we just need to get them into the right hands, and we need to educate on the value of various metrics. The larger companies, we need to understand that the world has changed from an old kind of burst or campaign situation into an always-on world, and the way that we measure needs to change to evaluate that. Ultimately, as Fiona has identified, we need to help everybody understand the need for a unified measurement framework, not individual specific ones to individual campaigns or ideas. And finally, within agencies, I think we probably, and I'm sure some agencies will disagree because they've obviously got it correct, there is limited understanding of the whole picture because of the various siloed aspects going on. We need to try and break down these silos and try and bring back the age of holistic evaluation, but using the modern tools, techniques, and evaluation data that is available to agencies and advertisers nowadays. Thank you very much.
And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Billy, who was did the modelling and analytic, was part of the modelling analytics team, and I think there are definitely some common themes coming out here. And I did one of the SME interviews with a firm that my daughter works for in the New Forest. It was absolutely fascinating. So Billy, over to you, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much, Denise. Lovely. I can't wait to confuse everyone with the equally strong but very different Irish accent. Great. So I'm delighted to be speaking on behalf of the modelling and analytics work stream this morning. I think when we think about the brief or the challenge to us as a group, it's really around advertising's outcomes era and the pressure that is on advertisers today from management teams to prove that hard link between the advertising campaigns that we run, the media that we buy, and the business outcomes that we're all here to serve. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to do a little whistle stop. I'm going to make an assessment of where we're at as an industry in terms of proving that link between advertising and outcomes. Pose a little bit of a provocation in terms of where we might be falling short as a measurement community, and then offer some solutions as to how we might structure ourselves more like sectors like finance and military intelligence in order to meet that challenge. I've only got 10 minutes to do it, so here we go. And the first thing I want to talk about is the business case for advertising, and I'm going to do that by juxtaposing two charts that I think people will probably be quite familiar with, certainly by two people that the audience will be familiar with. And the first one is a chart from Grace Kite, who I hasten to say has been the person leading the modelling analytics workstream. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, and you're stuck with me. But I thought the wise thing to do would be to do a cover version of one of Grace's greatest hits. And this is a piece of qualitative research that she did for IPA Effectiveness Conference back in 2024. So she went out and she interviewed a range of CFOs from around the UK. Lots of really interesting output from that, but I think probably the most interesting element is this chart that she built with Liz Kistruck from Motorway, the used car marketplace. So essentially what we're looking at with this chart here is the comparative business case for advertising, so how the business case for advertising investment stacks up versus other investments that a business might make in a given year. And it paints quite a rosy picture for the advertising community. So if you compare investment in advertising to investment in new technology or a new product, it's inherently less risky. Usually involves employing less new people. It usually, investment in technology or in product that might involve adopting new technology that's less proven. By comparison, investing in advertising usually doesn't require hiring a huge number of people, right? You can outsource most of the work to an agency that you can dismiss very quickly. You do need to make some forward commitment in media, but we're talking months here, we're not talking years. So it's quite attractive as a capital investment case. And if you combine that with some of the brilliant meta-analyses that the likes of ThinkBox have done, so I think this is probably the third mention of the Profitability 2.0 study already this morning. If you combine it with that, it's a really compelling business case for advertising, and the industry should be in a really healthy place. But of course, it's not in a healthy place, right? That is why most of us are here today. So the second chart I want to look at is a chart that Les Binet brought to light from a Gartner research piece earlier this year. So it's just a simple survey snapshot of advertising reinvestment rate from the US and UK marketing communities, and it's quite a scary picture, right? It's quite a steady decline in terms of the ad sales ratios for different advertisers. And when you look at a chart like this and you juxtapose it next to Grace's research, I think that is something any analyst, any modeler needs to take quite seriously. Why, when conceptually the business case is so compelling, are businesses choosing to invest less in advertising as a percentage of overall investment? And I think there's an obvious challenge here. There is that pressure from management teams onto marketers to prove that link between campaigns and between business outcomes. There is a pressure to go beyond some of the rules of thumb and techniques that we've used in the past. So things like ad sales ratios, things like excess share of voice theory, although those meta-analyses like long and short of it and like profitability, although they're really powerful and they're really kind of inspiring for us as an industry group, finance teams, boards of executives, they tend to want specific evidence rather than generalized norms from the full advertising industry. So I think the question to ask here is not necessarily are we doing the best work we can do to link advertising through to outcomes, but it's what outcomes are we linking advertising to? I think we need to be quite deliberate and quite careful about the metrics that we're looking at, about the timeframes that we're looking at those metrics over, and equally who's reporting those metrics, right? Who is the author? Who is the author of those outcomes? And I think that's where we need more careful thought as an industry, because ultimately, the campaigns the creative that we're developing, the media that we're buying, is in service of a single aim, right? It's in service of increasing shareholder value for the organizations that we're creating ads and buying ads on behalf of. So every measurement initiative needs to have that framing. How is what the outcomes we're measuring here, how is that laddering up to shareholder value? I think as a measurement industry, we've made great strides in advancing things like econometrics in recent years, in democratizing access to brand tracking data. But what we've maybe lost sight of is that bigger picture of understanding how our campaigns contribute to shareholder value, because those MMM studies, those brand trackers, they are part of that picture, but they're one component part, and we need to spend a bit of time working to aggregate those different elements. I won't kind of dwell on this study here that was released earlier in the year, but really powerful academic study where these guys asked a very simple question if we add brand tracking measures from Brand Index to financial analysts' revenue forecast, does it improve the quality of the forecast? So if we stack the brand tracking data on top of past sales data, category trends, perceptions of management quality, other kind of company-specific factors, does it improve the quality of the forecast? It massively improves the quality of the forecast. So a statistically significant 12% improvement in the forecast accuracy of financial analyst models when you add brand index data over the top. So I think what that is telling us is that, you know, the financial markets see benefits of brand equity and benefits of brand advertising that we're not necessarily reflecting in those robust econometric studies, incrementality experiments, or individual brand trackers. Of course, the challenge here, and Fiona and Anthony have already touched on it in their work stream, is that there's a lot of hard work involved in aggregating those component parts of the measurement framework. So I think in the last kind of 18 months or so, I think the measurement sector has really started to move beyond, you know, previously looking at incrementality itself as a North Star that advertisers need to move towards, and looking at a suite of truth, including incrementality as the North Star. So the need to aggregate all those individual elements of the measurement framework to really get an accurate view of how advertising is contributing to shareholder value. So that's really the challenge for us as an industry, is to kind of move out of the silos that Anthony talked about, right, the specialist disciplines here, and start to really cultivate the practice of triangulation, right, the ability to aggregate together, to carefully triangulate across all of those individual techniques, because it's only when we do that that we start to get a really accurate picture of what advertising can do for a business, and start to turn around that chart that Les very pertinently highlighted at the IPA last week. And the way I think we need to do that, and bear in mind this is perhaps quite a regretful chart for me to put up as a card-carrying analyst, but in order to do that as an industry, I think we need to learn to love analysts. And I think we've quite a few words have been kind of used already to describe this kind of multidiscipline. I think research director was what Anthony referred to from the agencies of old. What that role is called in other sectors is just the simple title of analyst, right? Like that is the person that people come to navigate uncertainty. And, you know, as I call the industry to kind of love analysts and bring them to the fore, that is, you know, it's a new behavior for marketing, but it's not a new behavior for other sectors. Whether it's finance, whether it's military intelligence, whether increasingly sports, analysts are at the front and center, right? They're a central cog in the decision-making process, rather than a peripheral function. So I think it might be a while before we get kind of Les Binet the movie, but certainly if we're to solve these problems, we need to put analysts much more to the fore, and that's a bit of a challenge for analysts as well. You know, I think it would be foolish to say that kind of any analytics team, agency, or client side is kind of perfectly positioned to deliver on this brief. So I think what we looked at as a group were what are some of the qualities that make analysts such a central and valuable part of the finance community and the military intelligence community that are equally as applicable in marketing. And I won't go through all 6 of these because I know that I'm standing between everyone and lunch, but just to pick out a couple of them. What I think is really important is multidiscipline. So the ability to be literate across all of those elements of the measurement framework that I just referred to be independent, and by independent I really mean having courage in your convictions to establish an independent point of view and put it forward on behalf of your clients. And lastly, to be decision-orientated, to not be constantly looking back and critiquing the past for the purpose of the analytics work to inform better decision-making in the future. So a couple of take homes I won't dwell on, but I think the most important point here is how we use modelling analytics to elevate advertising standing within the business community, and we can't put the accountability toothpaste back in the tube, but what we can do is make measurement better, make measurement more reflective of the type of shareholder value that advertising is able to create. I'll leave it there because the clock is flashing.
Great.
Do you know what? That was brilliant. I could talk about measurement all day and all night if you let me, but I won't because I know we're standing between you and lunch. But I think, Brian, your observations would be quite helpful.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to make any. I can't follow these guys. I mean, of course not. Except to say, just to reiterate one thing that Billy said, which was that special thanks to Billy because this team has been working on this now for 8 months or something. Billy's been working on it for about 8 minutes because unfortunately, Grace Kite was unable to join us today. So thanks very much, Billy, indeed for stepping in. Okay, we have about a minus 10 minutes for questions. But if anybody has got any burning questions that they'd like to ask this team, then
I'd be interested in John's perspective on what the other work streams have said.
I think it's pretty well aligned to that framework I kind of put up earlier on. It's the reality of needing to understand those key critical pillars of exposure to people, impacting people's minds and memory, and then, to your point, at the end, business impact and incrementality. That's the three kind of fundamentals in my mind. I think you each pick those up beautifully. It's a really complex tapestry. I'm concerned when I hear agencies are moving towards an outcomes-based model, for example. If you take that world to the extreme, if the incentive is wrong, if the outcome is wrong, we'll just get more of the bad behaviours. We'll miss out. Clients won't care about the media, about where stuff's going. They'll only care about money in, outcomes out. And that is where a lot of stuff is heading, I think quite boldly and openly from some of the groups as well. And that's a concerning space. So making sure, as a brand, as an advertiser, you've got a rigid measurement and a success framework in place is the most key part.
I think Jeff Eales, you can always be relied upon to put a question, can't you?
Denise, I've got a microphone already.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Well done.
Matthew Hook, look up, we're a storytelling consultancy, but I spent 18 years of my life before that in various media agencies. And the first 18 years was all focused on really big advertisers and big agencies and big competitors. So it was great today to hear about SMEs, which obviously is a vast amount of the advertising market and the bit that we've probably all left behind. I guess the really awkward question is, Anthony, I loved your description of the things that SMEs need. They really need tools to help them understand measurement, accountability, to have better conversations. The fact is, insofar as those tools exist, 99% of the content that's being created that actually does help SMEs and the tools that help SMEs is coming from a couple of platforms. And we as an industry, pretty much all the bodies that represent us, the places where we meet, are funded by, and mainly in support of really big advertisers and really big agencies. So I thought you had a brilliant task list. I would love to see that task list done. How do we get it done when no one here is sitting on a cross-industry SME collaboration budget?
Tricky. When we started this whole sort of movement, 18 months or so ago, so this is the second presentation, the second event, I think we naively went into this that, we'll have all the answers in a few weeks' time, we'll just crack on and pop down the pub and celebrate. And as we went into this group, certainly as Fiona outlined, we've been given a very clear brief. Right, you've sorted the problem last time, just crack on with all of the deliverables. And we suddenly realised we can't do that. We're on a journey here. And I think where I hope we've got to now is to identify the problem and identify potential solutions. Everybody involved in this group is a volunteer. We've got day jobs. So I think we've got to identify, certainly in the SME area, there are people there are large businesses sort of identifying that there's money to be had there. There's a lot of money to be had there. As an industry, we've got to decide, is that just something we'll forget about, or do we really want to corral around it? And I think if we corral around it, we probably need to identify how we can resource it, because my business is being very helpful, allowing me time off to do this, but they're not going to fund me spending 2 days a week for the next 2 years to solve it. We're going to need to resource it somehow between all of us, but at least hopefully we've got a direction where we need to go. Thanks, Anthony.
Okay, I think one of the things, just to build on, it was a good question, that one of the things to build on that question was that we came out of the event we hosted last September, and then we sort of thought, quite a few people said, now what are you going to do? And we went, I don't know. But we sat down and we sort of cracked on, and we thought the best thing to do would be to set up the work streams to then host an event, obviously today. It's a perfectly good question and challenge to say, well, now what are you going to do? I'll just ask if you could give us a half an hour or so to work it out. And then I think it is a good question, and we're not going anywhere. We're not going away. We want this movement to continue. We just need to work out how to put together a sort of group, as Anthony correctly says, of volunteers, and to make the most out of the sort of collected wisdom and skills that we have within the movement in order to come up with some definite outcomes and next steps to move things forward.
And I think it's worth saying, that what this movement recognises is that there is loads of good work going on around the industry. It's trying to sort of corral that. I give a shout out to Media Mind. The iPay does lots of training. ISBA does lots of stuff. So it's sort of trying to work out actually how do we bring a collective voice to what's going on. So I think, Jeff, you've got an opportunity for a question, and then we've got some answers.
Last question, apparently. I think, Jeff.
I've got one question and one comment, one observation. First question is, I completely agree with you about silos. So what do you think our best first steps would be to, it says work on measurement silos. What work do you think we should do? What's our first best steps to try to get that fragmentation back together? And the second comment is a comment that today, most of what you're talking about is measurement. I've worked in the industry far too long, and measurement and currency have been the same thing. Minute by minute currency is the same as a minute by minute measure, and they are the same things in linear TV. Those two things, in my humble opinion, are diverging because you can't measure impressions like an impact. So the next question would be, don't forget we have to have a currency. We need a currency that is rigorous, agreed, trusted, and something that we will all sign up to. It doesn't need to be right? It doesn't need to be right, but it does need to be something we all sign up to. How do we make sure that we have a currency as good as it's been and under pressure for the next 20 years?
What was your definition?
Yeah, I was going to say there was a very good comment made a million years ago by a chap nobody in this room, I suspect, will remember except possibly John Billett, called Rodney Harris. And Rodney said something like, audience measurement is nothing to do with truth. It's basically a treaty between interested parties.
Agreed.
Okay, I think we've got to leave it there.
I think we should. I think we need to leave it there. Before you all go, though, we did promise you little treats through the day. So first of all, we're going to put the lights down. We're going to ask you to come back after lunch at 12. So what time is it now? At 1:45. 1:45. So we're a little bit behind. But can we just put the lights down and go to our first little treat? Thank you.
You right there, Jake?
Yeah, just turn to a friend. You look nice.
Thank you. You smell nice.
I know.
dog needs walking. Come on, lads. I have a life too, Bill. That's for crumpets, sweetheart. Who had the calamari? It was for the table. I didn't eat any calamari, so I'm not paying for any calamari. What are you, 7?
You think after 30 years I'd be prepared for this. But I'm not. I really should have saved more. Or anything, really. Anyway, happy retirement, me.
Our relationship with money is formed from a young age. That's why our expert team is here, to help you take control of your money today. Barclays, make money work for you.
I'm the hottest round, and if you want me, y'all can stop me now. See you with me now, the biggie bounce. I know you think the way I switch my style. Get your freak on, 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 get your freak on. People, here I come, sweat me when I'm done. Now people gather round, now people jump around. Get your freak on, get your freak on.
I'm knackered.
Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you at 1:45.